Adventures of Superman, John Kent, issue 4, Tom Taylor writing with Derek Robertson on the art, which is a change, actually. It was Clayton Henry on the first...
It was, and this is a change for the worse for me. I'm not a big fan of Robertson stuff.
That's interesting, because it's a change for the better for me, because I don't like Clayton Henry that much.
Clayton Henry has one specific problem with the foreheads, that the elongated faces. He has very, very long faces on a lot of characters.
Mm-hmm.
But I tend to at least like his really clean lines. Robertson, it's just, it never quite works for me. Like, he's always just a little bit too...
Yeah, and I should specify, I'm not like super into this art either. It doesn't annoy me as much as Clayton Henry's foreheads does. So it just, inherently, it's a bit better for me.
That's definitely still a Clayton Henry cover, right? Because John's got a forehead.
Oh yeah, massive forehead. So
I don't have to look. I just see the forehead.
So I know for a fact that you hadn't read any of this until today. So you've read the first 4 issues. Yeah. I am of the opinion that this is the best arc that Taylor's done for John Superman. I don't know if you feel similar.
Oh, it's not even close.
So you're agreeing with me?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
100%. Like I think his the previous John stuff we had was fine. Like it was always coming up against Nightwing. I think we were always like, I mean, yeah, but Nightwing's just so much better. Maybe this isn't bad. And I stand by that. It wasn't a bad book.
No. It was perfectly solid, but I think this arc has gotten to the meat of things, and the way it's using, the Injustice Superman and John being challenged by these other versions of his father, and this universe where his father did some bad. And I think this one, the last issue had that, because I loved the last issue. The last issue had those great moments where we talked about seeing the fear on the person's face, and he that told him everything he needed to know about who this Superman was on this Earth. And I think this issue is very interesting because he's kind of like struggling with like who do I side with here?
Because obviously I didn't read all the Bendis stuff where John was away. I'm assuming all that stuff with Ultraman was in that book.
Yeah,
like him trapped in the volcano.
Yeah. Ultraman held him captive while he was in his teenage years on a different Earth. So.
I got it perfectly fine from context here, and I was like, I guess that was all in that Bendis book. So
it was nice that kind of came into it, but it's also fun to like mix Ultraman with Injustice Superman, because it's like, okay, he's not as bad as Ultraman, but he's still bad.
he's not actively hunting out other Supermen, but he is kind of terrible on his own world.
Yeah, no, he's pretty awful.
And I kind of really like this setting of post Injustice where it seems like he's trying to be a kind of good guy. He's not as outright evil as he is at some point in the Injustice timeline, right?
From what I know, yeah, because I've never read the comics. I've watched through the first. I've watched both games actually. Now that I think about it, I've not played the second game myself, but
I've also watched the movie, the animated movie they did.
Oh yeah, okay.
I think he comes across a lot more evil in some of those, whereas here, yes, he's a terrible fascist dictator, but it at least presents it as he thinks he's doing the right thing to some degree, right? He's a little bit more charismatic than I think I traditionally think of as Injustice Superman.
Yeah, they're almost going for something that's a little bit more Homelander here, and not in personality, obviously, but I mean, in that he's putting on a bit of a face that's the sort of the political friendly version of who he is, but then the way other people talk about him being a tyrant, it makes me think a little bit of Homelander and the Boys, and like, he's putting on the
funny you mentioned that. I'm pretty sure Derek Robertson's the artist for the Boys.
Oh, is he? Oh, there you go. Fun stuff. I like that. The Lex of this universe goes to the Batman and his team and says, "Hey, this Ultraman dick from this other Earth was trying to kill Superman, and he had a way to do it. So we have to look into this." And then John shows up and gets all pissy about it, and Batman attacks. They have a bit of a fight. But what I liked about this is that once things do calm down, after John's electric powers all flare up, is he yells out Babs' name, right? He says, "Babs, stop!" And she's like, "Wait, you know who I am?" Because clearly, the supers and that don't know who Barbara Gordon actually is, as Batgirl on this Earth. And it's like, okay, and there's an Alfred here, and it's this thing where he's not quite ready to accept that his father on this Earth is necessarily the worst of the worst yet, even though he suspects it. But he has this point where he's like, but this team has Alfred and Barbara Gordon, and that kind of tells me a lot.
Usually a winning side, yeah.
So even though obviously it has these mixed feelings on Batman, he calls him a judgmental dick in every universe or something to that effect. It kind of sets up some, and sure, obviously you would say Superman's obviously this great judge of character, so if he can be different here, then there's an argument that anyone could be. But, you get his logic. Okay, these two are on this side, on this Earth, so maybe, and this all leads him to going to see this universe's Jay, because he wants a sort of outside the superhero opinion of everything that's going on, just like the man in the street, if you will. And sure enough, Jay tells him what's going on and paints a pretty clear picture that Superman killed Green Arrow, that he's been
Black Canary.
Yeah, he's a tyrant, all these things. And I've glossed over as well that there's a scene with Damian, because Damian works for Superman on this Earth and gets all accusatory. I did particularly enjoy when John does the sound effect and is like, that's what you do when you know someone else is right, but you don't want to agree with them.
Yeah. That noise, that sound effect is probably the most Damian thing. If you had to distill Damian into like one essence, it's that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair.
Like when there's those things where they want to show, like, reveal a character off panel, but they do it with a line of dialogue, and you see the line of dialogue, and you're like, is that who I think it is? Like, to get you excited first. That's all you have to do with Damian, and you know who it is.
Yeah, I think the end of this issue is that Damian shows up to Jay and threatens him and says, "What did you tell him? What was he talking about?" So that's kind of the threat that we leave off on. But
yeah, because Damian planted a tracker on John.
Yeah, so
which I thought immediately was like, oh god, he's going to lead him straight back to Batman and all the others, which he might still. I didn't expect him to follow him to Jay, which is a little bit more sinister, I think, because especially on this world where Jay's completely just a random civilian.
Yeah, I don't think he has his powers here.
It doesn't seem like it.
Yeah, I like this issue. I didn't think it was. I think the last issue is probably my favorite issue of the arc so far, because it had that great moment where he's like, this kid's scared of me, and like what that means. I thought the way it set it up with these conversations with this Superman, and it was so perfect the way it crescendoed to this realization, and it said so much so quickly because you just got it. Here it's a bit more of the nitty gritty, and it's all solid stuff. I like him interacting with the other characters that he appreciates, but it's not quite as tight as last issue.
I think for me, this is probably the weakest issue of the four. Again, not like it's still a good issue. That'll become clear when I give it a score. I still like it a lot. I think for me, a combination of the art being, again, not bad, but less to my tastes. Let's be fair to say with that. Brings it down a little bit, and I just think, let's say, it's not quite as tight. It definitely has more of a feeling of this is the next issue, as opposed to being this is the issue where this happens. It feels a little bit more transitionary in the arc.
Yeah, I mean, when you compare it to the previous endings, like I think it was issue 1 or 2 ended with Ultraman get his neck snapped with Injustice Superman. Like that's like such a bold, like, holy shit, like this is where we're going with this. Whereas this doesn't leave it off as like, obviously, yeah, it's going to put Damian against John, and that's going to be interesting. But it's,
I think you can't have that moment at the end of every issue, because that would get old quick, and you run out of shock value. But yeah, this issue just feels like it's lacking a little bit of the spark almost that some of the other issues had. But not something that I'm concerned about going forward, but more just like I say, it feels like a transitional issue in that, okay, we're moving along to the next bit, and there'll be something exciting coming up.
Yeah, and it's issue 4, so it makes sense. We're at that point for the 6.
Yeah.
So, all right. What are you giving Adventures of Superman, John Kent, issue 4?
I'm going to give it a 7. I think it's pretty good still.
Yeah, I agree with a 7. I think, art's not amazing, and I don't think it's got those emotional high points that the last issue did, which I really loved. But it's a solid middle issue.